verse number 104, Surah number 16. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الذين لا يؤمنون بآيات الله لا يهديهم الله ولهم عذاب أليم إنما يفتري الكذب الذين لا يؤمنون بآيات الله وأولئك هم الكاذبون من كفر بالله من بعد إيمانه إلا من أكره وقلبه مطمئن بالإيمان ولكن من شرح بالكفر صدرا فعليهم غضب من الله ولهم عذاب عظيم صدق الله العظيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Verse number 104. إن الذين لا يؤمنون بآيات الله. Indeed, those who do not believe in the evidence presented by Allah, لا يهديهم الله, Allah will not guide them. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ, and for them is a severe torment. This is verse number 104. Verse 103 was وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ. Indeed, we know what they say. What do they say? إِنَّمَا يُعَلِّمُهُ بَشَرٌ, that a human teaches him. There's a human that teaches Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Quran answered that لِسَانُ الَّذِي يُلْحِدُونَ إِلَيْهِ أَعْجَمِيٌّ وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ عَرَبِيٌّ مُبِينٌ. That person who they say teaches Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he first of all does not teach Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Second, he is a foreigner, does not speak the Arabic language, or if he does, is not able to speak it eloquently. And this here is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam bringing to you the Quran in the most eloquent Arabic possible. إِنَّمَا يَفْتَرِ الْكَذِبَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ. Indeed, those who fabricate lies against Allah are the ones who do not believe in Him. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَاذِبُونَ, and they are the liars. مَنْ كَفَرَ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ إِيمَانِهِ. Verse number 106. Whoever kafara billah, whoever disbelieves in Allah, min ba'di imanihi, after believing in Him, after having accepted faith, after having faith in Allah, except the one ukriha, makruh, ukriha, except for the one who has been compelled, wa qalbuhu mutma'innun bil iman, and his heart is content with faith. This person is the exception. وَلَكِنْ مَنْ شَرَحَ بِالْكُفْرِ صَدْرًا, but whose heart is open, whose chest is open for disbelief. He's content with his disbelief. He's hanky-dory. He's happy where he is in his disbelief. فَعَلَيْهِمْ غَضَبٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ, then upon him is the anger of Allah. This is Mufassirin, they say this ayat is regarding Ammar ibn Yasir. Ammar ibn Yasir, was one of the Sahaba. His family was persecuted by Rasul. His family was persecuted by the Kuffar. Yasir was his father, Sumayya was his mother. And Yasir radiallahu anh, the father, was killed by Abu Jahl, and so was Ammar's mother, Sumayya radiallahu anha. She was also killed by Abu Jahl. So Ammar, the son, seeing his mother and father being killed in front of his very own eyes, he was being compelled to say words of kufr, to say words of disbelief. And he did say something to pacify Abu Jahl. He did say some words of kufr just to save his skin, to save his life. And he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and expressed what happened and the guilt that he felt inside for saying words of kufr. These verses were revealed. Man kafara billahi min ba'di imanihi. Whoever disbelieves in Allah, min ba'di imanihi, after having faith in Him, then here comes the exception. Except man ukriha, the one who has been compelled out of force, but his heart is content. Mutma'innum bil iman. His heart is mutma'in. His heart is content with iman. Now coming back to the beginning, whoever disbelieves in Allah after having accepted faith, walakin man sharaha bil kufr, and his heart is open for disbelief. فَعَلَيْهِمْ غَضَبٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ. Then upon such people, there is Allah's anger. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. And for them is a severe punishment. If he's in a smelly place for a long time, what happens? He gets used to that smell. So there are people whose heart is open, their chest is open for disbelief. They are content with disbelief. They find nothing wrong with it. One is a person is in disbelief, he's not a believer, but he's looking for the truth. He feels that this is not the truth, and his journey is to find the truth. Here's a person who doesn't find anything wrong with being an atheist. You find people like that. What has happened? Sharaha, sadr. Sharaha, the same word sharaha is used. Walakin man sharaha bil kufr. The Surah Alam Nashrah laka sadrak. Have we not opened your chest for you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? So one is to have shari sadr, to be fully convinced, to be fully satisfied. Upon what? Upon belief or disbelief. Sometimes a person can be fully satisfied on belief, and sometimes he can be fully satisfied on disbelief. And the physical example that I gave you, if a person is used to living in a messy house, all right, and he comes home, his house is messy, he won't find anything wrong with it. But there's a person who's very particular about cleanliness, and yet that guest comes to your house, they will find your house to be really, really messy. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ اسْتَحَبُّوا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا عَلَى الْآخِرَةِ. And why does this happen? ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ, that is because اسْتَحَبُّوا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيا عَلى الْآخِرَةِ, they preferred the worldly life over the hereafter. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And indeed Allah does not guide the disbelieving people. أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ طَبَعَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ. Such are the people. What type of people? Who chose the dunya over the akhirah. Basically they chose their personal gain, their benefit over the truth. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ. And you find a lot of people, they have some interest. They have some interest speaking up or advancing the agenda of a certain organization. And then what happens? Even though they see the truth, and the truth is contradictory to what their organization espouses, but because they are a spokesperson or they're on the board of that organization and they get paid, right, sometimes millions of dollars, they will speak on behalf of that organization. And they will put forward the agenda of that organization. What has happened? They preferred the worldly life over the hereafter. أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ طَبَعَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ. Such are the people whom Allah has put a seal over their hearts and over their hearing and over their sight. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. And they are the ones who are heedless. لَا جَرَمَ أَنَّهُمْ لَا جَرَمَ. No doubt. أَنَّهُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. That they in the hereafter are the losers. ثُمَّ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لِلَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا. Then indeed your Lord, لِلَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا, regarding those people who did the hijrah, هَاجَرُوا, مِن بَعْدِ مَا فُتِنُوا, after they were put in fitna, after they were tested and tried, after they went through trials and tribulations, what did they do? They did the hijrah. ثُمَّ جَاهَدُوا. Then what did they do after the hijrah? ثُمَّ جَاهَدُوا. After they immigrated, they strove with their life and with their wealth. They did jihad. وَصَبَرُوا. And they were patient. They exercised patience. إِنَّ رَبَّكَ مِن بَعْدِهَا لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Indeed your Lord, مِن بَعْدِهَا, after this, in other words, after those people having gone through this process, which process? Hijrah, then jihad, then sabr. لَغَفُورٌ Rahim is most forgiving, most merciful. Or, indeed your Lord, after this, in other words, after hijrah, after immigration, after they performed the migration, is most forgiving, most merciful. This is a Makki surah, is it not? Surah An-Nahl. But this is an ayat that indicates that hijrah is coming up. Hijrah, migration, has not been made mandatory as of yet. But this is one ayat that is clearly indicating that that is in the cards. يَوْمَ تَأْتِي كُلُّ نَفْسٍ تُجَادِلُ عَنْ نَفْسِهَا. يَوْمَ تَأْتِي, Yawm, the day of resurrection. تَأْتِي كُلُّ نَفْسٍ, each soul will come. تُجَادِلُ نَفْسِهَا, defending, arguing on behalf of itself, trying to save itself. وَتُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا عَمِلَتْ, and each soul will be given in full مَا عَمِلَتْ, what it has done, what it has earned. وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ, and no one will be wrong. وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا, and Allah gives an example, مَثَلًا قَرْيَةً, of a town, كَانَتْ, which was آمِنَةً مُطْمَئِنَّةً, which was safe and مُطْمَئِنَّةً, the inhabitants were content. يَأْتِيهَا رِزْقُهَا رَغَدًا مِنْ كُلِّ مَكَانٍ, its rizq, its sustenance, its income, its revenue would come min kulli makan, from all directions. Raghadan, in abundance, from the north, from the south, from the east and the west. The economy is important. A town, a city, a dwelling, a state, a country, its economy, and having a good economy, having a prosperous economy is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَكَفَرَتْ بِأَنْعُمِ اللَّهِ. What happened? فَكَفَرَتْ بِأَنْعُمِ اللَّهِ. An'um, plural of ni'mah. فَكَفَرَتْ بِأَنْعُمِ اللَّهِ. It denied, it refused, it rejected the ni'mas of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was ungrateful to the ni'mah, to the blessings of Allah. What happened? فَأَذَاقَهَا اللَّهُ اللَّهُ لِبَاسَ الْجُوعِ وَالْخَوْفِ. Allah gave it a taste. Adhaq from dhawq, dha'iqa. فَأَذَاقَهَا اللَّهُ. Allah gave that town a taste of what? Libas al-ju'i wal-khawf, of the garment of hunger and fear. بِمَا كَانُوا يَصْنَعُونَ, because of their doing, because of what they did. This town, according to most mufassirin, is Makkatul Mukarramah. And this is the, of course it could be any town, but according to most mufassirin, it's Makkatul Mukarramah. And again, this is a Makki surah, and the drought that they are referring to came when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had migrated to Medina. So this is again an indication that here is your town, O people of Makkah. You are being provided rizq, sustenance from all north, south, east and west. The trade routes are open. Makkah was like, to give an example, when it comes to their trade routes and economy, was like Dubai of today. Because Dubai, when it declared it to be a what do you call it, duty-free port, all goods coming into Dubai, duty-free port, all goods coming in will not be charged any tax. So of course that's a nice port, duty-free port. So business booms. Makkah was sitting right there, smack dab in the middle of the trade routes from north to south. Yemen in the south, and Sham, Syria, in the north. And then from Yemen it was Africa, right? This side, because you right from Yemen you cross over and you're in Ethiopia. So you basically the whole of Africa on this side and the whole of Asia. From Syria was beyond Syria was the rest of Asia. Libas al-ju'i. What does Allah mention first? Ju' and khawf. Allah mentions hunger first, then fear. It is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in this country we don't have we have prosperity in this, and no one goes to sleep hungry, and also there's no fear. Our lives are not in danger. Surah Quraysh, لإلاف قريش إلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت. Allah says, worship the Lord of this house. الذي أطعمهم من جوع. Same two words are mentioned. الذي أطعمهم من جوع, who has fed you from hunger, who has saved hunger, removed hunger from you and has fed you. وآمنهم من خوف, and has given you safety. You don't have any fear that any enemy is going to attack. Imagine living in this, it's going to sleep every night in the fear that an enemy is going to attack. Even where you don't have, even in some Muslim countries where you don't have the threat of a bomb falling on your house while you're asleep, but still the level of security for your life and your property is not there. There is a good chance crime rates are up. There's a good chance your house could be burglarized. People, when they go from America, what do? They keep it on the down and low. They don't advertise that they're from America. Why? What's going to happen if you advertise that you're from America? Word is going to get out, and there might be, God forbid, some burglary at your house. You can't even let people know that you've come from America. Why? Because someone might kidnap you or there might be a burglary in your house. So, and what is the first and foremost responsibility of a government? To provide protection of life and property to its citizens. That's the first and foremost responsibility of a government. And if the government cannot provide protection of life and property, then the government has failed in its first and foremost responsibility. Jewel. And here hunger is mentioned first. Why? Because actually fear comes after hunger. When there's enough food on the table, then there's also the absence of fear. But what happens in many cases is when the economy goes south, people start losing their jobs. What happens? Crime rate goes up. So there's a direct correlation between hunger and fear. Libas al-ju'i wal khawf. Allah mentions hunger first, then fear. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْهُمْ. And even in the current political climate and the supporters of Donald Trump, what they feel economically, many of his supporters, they feel economically what? At a loss, disenfranchised. So then that breeds what? Fear. Right? So the two, hunger and fear, are tied together. وَلَقَدْ And as a matter of fact, I believe in 27 years, or if the demographics continue the way they are, then the Caucasian white race will lose its majority in the United States. So basically, the minority will become the majority. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْهُمْ وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْهُمْ And indeed a messenger has come from them. This is why I believe this verse about the town, that Allah, the example that Allah gave in this previous verse is about Makkah. Why? Because the very next verse, what does it say? وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْهُمْ Indeed, a messenger has come from amongst them. فَكَذَّبُوهُ They rejected him. They denied him. فَأَخَذَهُمُ الْعَذَابُ In a torment, azab, punishment took them. وَهُمْ ظَالِمُونَ While they were in a state of wrongdoing. It was because of their wrongdoing. فَكُلُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا So eat of that rizq that Allah has provided you. Halal, lawful, and tayyiba, pure. What's the connection? There Allah was feeding them. Halal and tayyib, rizq. And they were ungrateful. They were ungrateful. Here Allah says, so eat. Mimma razaqakumullah. The rizq that Allah has provided you. Halal and tayyiba. Halal and tayyib. Lawful and pure. Washkuru. Washkuru. Now, washkuru, but be thankful. Be grateful. Ni'matallah, to Allah's blessings. In kuntum iyyahu ta'budun. If you worship Him indeed. Innama harrama alaykumul mayta. But yes, there are things that Allah has made haram. Innama harrama alaykumul maytata wad-dama wa lahmal khinzir. Indeed, Allah has forbidden for you mayta. What is mayta? Mayyit, mayta, dead carcass. Wad-dam, and blood. Wa lahmal khinzir, and the flesh of swine. Wa ma uhilla li ghayri Allahi bi. And what has been slaughtered in someone other than Allah's name. فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ Whoever has been compelled, غَيْرَ بَاغٍ without willfully disobeying, وَلَا عَادٍ nor crossing the limit. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ Then indeed Allah is most forgiving, most merciful. Now here, some of the things that they would do, on one hand, we're coming to that, on one hand they claim themselves to be the followers of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Quraysh. But here they are, Quran explains, that here you are doing all these things which are contradictory to the teachings of Ibrahim alayhi salam. إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَ Mayta is haram. The question of what do they call it? Shocking the animal? Where they, either with a stun gun or by the process of electrocution. If it dies, this is the question, if it dies through that process, it's not supposed to and it's not meant to and it doesn't typically. But if it does, then even before it has gone through the blade, what has happened? The animal has died. So when you do, I don't know, I have seen it many times, I'm sure you have seen it, some of you have seen it. A big animal cannot be controlled. So what do? They put, doesn't look like a gun at all. It looks like, more like a, have you seen a pepper shaker that they use at a restaurant? And you have a bowl of salad, and the waitress comes and she starts what? Putting fresh grounded pepper in your salad, and she tells you when to stop. She asks you to tell her when to stop. That's what it looks like. And they put that on the forehead of the cattle, boom, and they press. And there, of course, there's a hole that goes through. The reasoning is, well, it is halal because that does not kill the animal, at least not there and then. If you're quick enough, and then you take the knife and say, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, that is halal for you. They do that here for all the lamb and goat also. The slaughterhouse here in, what, Spanish Fork? Springfield, where all the stores get their meat from. They use the same stunning process for the lamb and goat. Okay. Even though they don't really have to, because it's a small animal, they can easily sit on it. Faruqazi can easily sit on top of it and slaughter the lamb and the goat. Chicken, what happens to the poultry is that it goes through this water, hang it upside down, and it goes through this water that has current in it. They do that with turkeys also.
That halal too?
Huh?
That halal?
That being halal or not is a separate question. The question that I was raising through this word meita here is that does that process kill the animal? Because if that process, passing the turkey or the chicken through water that has current in it, or the process of stunning, if it kills the animal, then of course it's haram because you have a dead animal. Right? But it does not. It does not kill the animal. Well, at least that's what the experts say. فَمَنِ الطُّرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ. Now, if Islam being a practical religion, if there ever a need arises, a person is dying, and I mean literally dying, not just feeling a little hungry, but if a person is literally dying of hunger, then he can eat meita. He can eat dead animal. He can eat swine, pork. فَمَنِ الطُّرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ. غَيْرَ بَاغٍ means without enjoying it. غَيْرَ بَاغٍ means without willfully disobeying. In other words, he's doing it because he has no other choice. وَلَا عَادٍ, and without crossing the limit. In other words, if he's dying of thirst and he has to drink scotch, then he should just take a few sips and not take down the whole bottle. Wala adin means don't take down the whole bottle, just only take as much as you need to survive. You know, this is my one and only chance to eat bacon, so let me eat as much bacon as I can. No. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. You'll just have one strip of bacon, or maybe half a strip of bacon. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Indeed, Allah is most forgiving, most merciful. You don't need to sweat. You don't need to feel guilty. Allah is most forgiving, most merciful. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَا تَصِفُ أَلْسِنَتُكُمُ الْكَذِبِ. And do not say with your tongues, describing falsely, هَذَا halal, that this is halal, وَهَذَا haram, and this is haram. لِتَفْتَرُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبِ. Fabricating lies against Allah, inventing lies against Allah. The Makkans would do that. They would say this is halal and this is haram. We covered that in Surah number 6, Surah An-Nahl. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَفْتَرُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبِ. And sometimes Muslims do that also. They will, without any research, without finding out, without really knowing, they will say, oh, this is halal, or this is haram. Halal and haram words should not be taken lightly, should be taken very seriously. A mufti, what does he do? He does not declare something as halal or something as haram. What does he do when he says this is halal or this is haram? Is that what a mufti does when he gives a fatwa? He's simply uncovering for you what you didn't know. What's already halal, he's just exposing the halal as halal, and what's haram, he's exposing it as haram. That's different. You see the point? That's different than something that's halal and you call that haram, or something that's haram and you refer to that as, or think of that as halal, or something you don't know, but you believe that this is halal, so you think, or you say to the world, this is halal. Or you think this is haram, so you announce to the world that this is haram. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَفْتَرُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبِ. We have a brother like that. Every few months he comes with something. That's it. Once he said, it's haram to call me Molana. Haram, haram, haram. It's not haram to call someone Molana. Because of course, actually there's a verse in the Quran. Allah, what is it? Mawla huwa Jibreel wa salihul mu'mineen. The word Mawla is used for Allah and Jibreel and the righteous believers. But Mawla has a different meaning in Urdu. Mawla which simply means leader. If a word has two meanings, Mawla, first of all, is not only used for Allah. Mawla is used very commonly. Someone who the master who freed a slave, the master who freed that slave would be called the Mawla. So if Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu freed Bilal radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu would be the Mawla. That's used commonly in the books of fiqh.
It's also used in the Quran.
In the Quran.
It says that Mawlahu and al-Abd is blind and doesn't speak and he doesn't go there.
Right. And then of course Mawla, and then when I was coming to Mawla in Urdu has a different meaning, right? Just like bus. Right? Bus in English has a different meaning. In Urdu, what does it mean? Stop. Enough. Anyhow. Then he had another, when I made the announcement that please don't park in front of the businesses, the brother said it's haram to park in front of businesses. It's not haram to park. You can't say it's haram to park. You say, why don't you tell the people that it's haram to park? It's not haram to park. It's makruh, it's undesirable, it's unwanted, it's not permissible. Okay. Mata'un qaleel. Okay. Coming back to the ayat about إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةِ. Indeed, Allah has made the maytah, the dead animal, and the blood and the flesh of swine, and whichever animal has the name of someone other than Allah has been pronounced. This verse has been mentioned in 4 surahs. Similar verse has been mentioned in 4 surahs. Surah Baqarah, Surah Ma'idah, which both are Madani, Surah An-Nahl, and now Surah An-Nahl. Surah An-Nahl and Surah An-Nahl are Makki. Just wanted to point that out because the whole discussion and debate over halal and dhabiha and this revolve around those 4 verses. One in Baqarah, one in Ma'idah, one in Surah An-Nahl, and now here in Surah An-Nahl. Uhilla. What's uhilla? One is halal. This is with the small ha. Uhill, like hilal. Hilal. What is hilal? The crescent, right? When a hilal used to appear, when the crescent would appear, the people would gather and say, look at the crescent. So to pronounce something, to glorify, to announce. So what happens when you are sacrificing an animal? You are pronouncing someone higher, Allah's name. Uhilla. Word derivation is interesting. You see how? Hilal, uhilla. Mata'un qaleel, walahum adhabun alim. those who fabricate lies against Allah. Mata'un qaleel. This is, what is it? Mata'un qaleel. A temporary enjoyment, and for them is a severe punishment. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ هَادُوا, and those who have become Jews. حَرَّمْنَا مَا قَصَصْنَا عَلَيْكَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. We have made haram مَا قَصَصْنَا عَلَيْكَ مِنْ قَبْلِ, what we have already mentioned to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, before this. Before this, we have already meant, we have made haram for them, for the Jews, what we have already told you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, before this. Before this, Surah An-Nahl, because that's the only other Makki surah, right? وَمَا ظَلَمْنَاهُمْ, and we did not wrong them. وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ, but they used to wrong themselves. ثُمَّ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لِلَّذِينَ عَمِلُوا السُّوءَ, then your Lord indeed, لِلَّذِينَ عَمِلُوا السُّوءَ, for those who did wrong, for those who did evil, بِجَهَالَةٍ, in ignorance, out of ignorance. ثُمَّ تَابُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ, then they repented after that, وَأَصْلَحُوا, and then did good. إِنَّ رَبَّكَ مِنْ بَعْدِهَا لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, indeed your Lord after that is most forgiving, most merciful. Bijahalatin, of course, if a person, all those people who accepted Islam, the Sahaba who became Sahaba, who we look up to as the guiding stars for the rest of the Ummah, if they had done any of the wrong, if they had taken upon themselves to say this is halal or this is haram, or if they had eaten any of the animals on which the names of idols had been pronounced at the time of slaughtering, what does Quran say? They did that out of jahala, bijahalatin. They did that out of ignorance. But this condition, bijahalatin, is not restrictive. In other words, if a person does that without ignorance, he does that knowingly, he does that purposely, he does that intentionally, still Allah will what? Forgive him if he has done tawbah. So that bijahalatin, that is not a restrictive condition. Inna Ibrahim kana ummah. Now comes the mention of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan qanitan. The previous 5 verses before this, the previous 5 verses were things that they were doing, battans, that they were not supposed to be doing. Now comes the next 4 verses are about Ibrahim alayhi salam. Okay, if you are the followers of Ibrahim alayhi salam, then this is what you should be doing. Inna Ibrahim kana ummah. Indeed, Ibrahim was an ummah. Ibrahim was, sometimes one person is equivalent to an organization. And he does the work that typically, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken work from one individual which you would think would require 1,000 people to do. Some scholars, they have written books, and you think, how could they have ever written these volumes and volumes of books? We don't even have time in our lifetime to read it. And if that work was to be done in this time, day and age, you would require a team of authors. Many books, they have half a dozen authors. They have 10, 15 authors. You would require a team of authors with millions and millions of dollars set aside for them to do research. And then you would have a separate building for them. And there would be rooms and offices, and they would have all the research tools available at their disposal. Then, maybe after a decade or so, this team, which had a budget of $10 million, comes out with a book that centuries ago, one scholar on his own in his lifetime would write many such books. So, Inna Ibrahim kana ummah. Another explanation of ummah is imam. The ummah here simply means Inna Ibrahim kana imam. Indeed, Ibrahim was a leader. Qanitan lillah. Obedient to Allah. Qanitan is someone who is obedient joyfully, not grudgingly. One is to be obedient grudgingly. I have to pray, no choice. I have to get up for suhoor, I have to fast, no choice. What are my family members going to say if I don't fast? One is qanitan lillah, obedient to Allah, joyfully. Hanifan, on the straight path of monotheism. Walam yaku min al-mushrikeen, and he was not from amongst the polytheists. Shakiran lillah, shakiran li an'umi. He was what? Shakir. Quran says shakiran. He was grateful for Allah's blessings. Another prophet in the Quran has been mentioned as Shakir. Who? Nuh alayhi salam. Nuh alayhi salam has also been mentioned as Abdan Shakura, as someone who was grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are the two prophets that have been mentioned as great, being Shakir. Ibrahim alayhi salam and Nuh alayhi salam. A third prophet, Dawood alayhi salam, he has been told to do shukr. So obviously he did shukr. But Quran simply says, "I'malu ala Dawood shukra." O family of Dawood, including Dawood obviously, alayhi salam, do shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ijtabahu, Allah had chosen him. Allah had chosen Ibrahim alayhi salam. Wahadahu, and had guided him ila sirat al-mustaqim, towards the straight path. وَآتَيْنَاهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنًا, and Allah had given him hasana, good in this life. وَإِنَّهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ لَمِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, and indeed in the hereafter he is from amongst the righteous. ثُمَّ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ, then we reveal to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أَنِ اتَّبِعْ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا, that follow the millat, follow the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Hanifa, the straight way of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is being instructed to follow Ibrahim alayhi salam. ثُمَّ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ, then we sent wahi, ilayk, to you, O Muhammad, right? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أَنِ اتَّبِعْ, follow what? Follow Ibrahim alayhi salam in what? In Tawheed. Because the Sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is complete. And obviously the Sharia that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had, Ibrahim alayhi salam did not have that Sharia. Right? The detailed, the muamalat, right? The muasharat, the detailed life that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam explained for us, Ibrahim alayhi salam did not have that detailed Sharia. So what is Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam being instructed to follow? The Tawheed of Ibrahim alayhi salam. وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, and he was not from amongst the polytheists. إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ السَّبْتُ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, indeed we have made Saturday, we have designated Saturday عَلَى الَّذِينَ اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, for those, upon those who differed in it, upon those who argued over it. Either in one narration it comes that they were instructed to take Friday. But the followers of Musa alayhi salam, they did not want Friday, they wanted Saturday. So they argued, they differed in this. Another explanation is, remember when some of them, Allah told them not to fish on Saturday, and some of them did and some of them didn't? So this is something that they differed in. وَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَيَحْكُمُ بَيْنَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, and indeed your Lord will judge between them on the day of Qiyamah, فِي مَا كَانُوا فِيهِ يَخْتَلِفُونَ, in all those matters in which they used to differ, in which they used to argue. Which matters will Allah decide on the day of judgment? Matters of aqeedah, matters of belief. Allah will not decide. Allah will not decide on the day of judgment, okay, you used to put your hands straight down, according to Imam Malik, and you used to fold your hands according to Imam Abu Hanifa, okay, which one was correct, which one was incorrect? Is that what Allah is going to decide? Similarly, is Allah going to decide on the day of judgment, okay, you used to follow Isna and calculations, and you used to follow moon sighting, okay, which one is right? I'll tell you now, I'll tell you, you are right and you are wrong. What would Allah decide on the Day of Judgment? Because this has come again and again and again, right? Dozens and dozens and dozens of times that Allah will judge. فِيمَا كَانُوا فِيهِ يَخْتَلِفُونَ فِيمَا كَانُوا فِيهِ يَخْتَلِفُونَ. Allah will judge on the Day of Judgment that in which you used to differ, what you used to. Some would say something, others would say another. You had two camps. What would Allah judge? In matters of belief, aqidah. This is what Allah will judge. Some would say, is Jesus the Son of God or is he not? That is what Allah will judge. So, with Ramadan coming up, for the masses, for the general masses, it is not your responsibility to overwhelm yourself with this concern that when is the first of Ramadan. Why? Because those people who are in the position to decide, Allah will, if they are honest, as long as they are being honest, and they believe that the decision that they are making is according to Sharia or within the boundary of Sharia, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not hold them to account, even if they are wrong. And since we're on that topic, people said, can we have, someone suggested, well, can't we, like Rodney King, can't we all get along? Can't we all have Eid on one day? Well, see, if we were to make a committee for Utah, not too many masjids, we don't have 243 masjids like Chicago. We have, 7, 8, 9 masjids. Can't we all just get together and decide Eid on a Ramadan on a single day? Well, you would have to have a single criteria. You would have to have a single criteria. If you don't have a unifying criteria, then there's no point in even getting such a committee together. Because if you got the representatives of the masjids together, and one masjid said, I am going to follow Somalia, and another masjid said, I'm going to follow the North American Bosnian Association, right? And another masjid said, we're going to follow Saudi Arabia. And another masjid said, we're going to follow local sighting. And a third masjid said, we are going to follow Islam. So you can't really get a committee together, right? The only time you can get a committee together to have one unified decision is when you are all working on the same, when you are using the same criteria. Then that committee's job will be simply to see whether that criteria that they've already agreed upon has been met or not. Okay. Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah. Now, these are some words of advice to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and via Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to the whole ummah. Ud'u ila sabili rabbik, a very famous verse. Call towards the path of your Lord. Bil hikmah, Quran mentions three things. Bil hikmah, number one, with wisdom. Number two, wal maw'idatil hasana, good advice. And third, wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan, and persuade them with arguments which are best. Inna rabbaka huwa a'lamu biman dhalla an sabilihi wa huwa a'lamu bil muhtadin. Indeed, your Lord, He is most knowing of those who have gone away from the path, who have gone astray from the path, and He is most knowing of those who are rightly guided. Now, without going into too much detail, because of being a famous verse, right, you can go into a lot of detail. One explanation, which is very appealing, is that there are always three types of people. There's three categories in society. One are the general masses. The general masses. The second is the intelligentsia. Those who are the elite, the brains. But sometimes it's not only the brains or the elite or the intelligentsia that controls the masses. They do to some extent, but beyond them is another group of people who actually are, should I say, who hold all the cards. If you want to understand it in today's society, you have the masses, right? Then you have the politicians. But do politicians control everything? Beyond the politicians, there's another group. And that group is far more powerful than the politicians, than all the senators and the House of Representatives and the executive branch of the government combined. Those are the what? The billionaires, right? The bankers, what Bernie Sanders is speaking out against. They control. To an extent, to a large extent. Doesn't mean they control everything. That's why they say, what is America? Is it a democracy? Is it an oligarchy? It's a mix. There is a democracy, but it's also, there are special interest groups. The NRA, National Rifle Association, right? The amount of money they give to senators is mind-boggling. Millions. I can't remember the exact number, but it was in the millions. And those who are trying to ban guns, the amount of money they spent was like 10,000. It was laughable. So you have, on one hand, you have $67 million that the NRA is spending. And if there's a senator, if there's someone in the House who does not vote, then that person comes up under, that person is red flagged on their website. And the people in that state who are members of the NRA are told not to vote for this senator again. And the chances of that senator ever being elected again is very slim. Even though society, the masses, I believe the masses want guns to be banned. Oh, there was only one mass shooting that occurred in Australia. They were comparing this. One mass shooting that occurred 35 years ago in Australia. And how did they describe a mass shooting in which 5 or more people have been killed? I think 7 people were killed. They banned guns, all guns in Australia, firearms. They had a buyback system where the government bought the guns back from the people. And since then, in Australia, there has not been a single mass shooting. That's all. So anyhow, coming back, there are 3 classes of people, right? So, and there's 3 methods that have been mentioned in this ayah. Hikmah, Maw'idatil Hasana, Wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan. Maw'idatil Hasana, good advice, is for the general masses. Hikmah is for the intelligentsia. And Jadilhum billati hiya ahsan, and persuade them with with arguments that are best, in the best manner. That's for Wall Street. Inna rabbaka huwa a'lamu biman dhalla an sabilihi wa huwa a'lamu bil muhtadin. Wa in aqabtum fa'aqibu. And if you retaliate, wa in aqabtum, and if you retaliate, fa'aqibu, then retaliate bimithli ma uqibtum bi, in proportion to what you have been wronged. What's the connection? Come on, you should know this by now. This ayat is instructing Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam to call towards Allah using 3 methods. Hikmah, good advice, and persuasion. Then the next ayat is what? And if you retaliate, then retaliate in proportion to what you have been wronged. When you stand up to invite towards the truth, if you stand up against injustice, for example, what's going to happen? There are going to be special interests, either the bankers, right? There's going to be special interests who don't want to change the status quo. And they are going to oppose you, male and two. They are going to oppose you. And they are going to wrong you. And they're going to persecute you. So, you see? One is ibadat, one is our worship that we do. As long as you worship Allah, you won't face any opposition, will you? Did Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam face any opposition when he was worshipping Allah in the cave of Hira? Hira? Did he face any opposition? No. People actually said he was Sadiq, he was Amin. Right? And even in this day, if you many Jamaats who are going, they used to, not so as much nowadays, when they were going through small towns that did not have a masjid, where did they stay? The church. Church would open their doors. Right? I was on a trip to Spain with one non-Muslim. What did he do? When he saw me asking people which way is, Qibla. From Spain it was what? Southeast? Whatever. And I used to ask any passerby which way is southeast. So he decided to buy me a compass. So this non-Muslim bought me a compass so I'm able to know which direction to pray. They have no opposition to your ibadah. That's what I'm saying. Do they have any opposition to your ibadah? What do they oppose? Dawah. When you stand up and say, you are wrong. This is right. Allah is one. He's not three. Now you have rocked the boat. Now you're going to have opposition. So this ayah, Ud'u ila sabili rabbik, call towards the way of your Lord, towards the path of your Lord, with wisdom and good advice and persuasion. Nice persuasion. Then the next ayat is, and if they retaliate, do you see the connection now? And if you retaliate, means that they are the ones who what? Took the first hit. They hit you first. Then what? Only and only when they have hit you, then you are going to what? Retaliate. In other words, there's no sense of retaliating. You're retaliating against what? وَإِنْ عَاقَبْتُمْ. And if you retaliate, فَعَاقِبُوا, then retaliate بِمِثْلِ مَا عُوقِبْتُمْ, in proportion to what you have been wrong. If they have slapped you once, you don't slap them twice, you slap them once. وَلَئِنْ صَبَرْتُمْ. And if you are patient, لَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لِلصَّابِرِينَ, then patience is best. That is best. وَاصْبِرْ, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have patience. وَمَا صَبْرُكَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. And your patience is upon Allah. In other words, the reward of your patience is up to Allah. وَلَا تَحْزَنْ. And do not grieve. وَلَا تَقُ فِي ضَيْكٍ مِمَّا يَمْكُرُونَ. And do not be saddened in your heart over what they are plotting. خَفَا مَتْرَهِيَّ. You would say, that defines it best. خَفَا مَتْرَهِيَّ. Do not be saddened by what they are plotting and planning against you. إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا. إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا. Indeed, Allah is with those who have taqwa, who are God conscious. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مُحْسِنُونَ. And those who do good, those who are good doers. All the plotting and the planning in the world does not stand a chance against Allah if Allah is on your side. And if Allah is not on your side, then end of his word. The Quran says, إِن يَنْصُرْكُمُ اللَّهُ. If Allah helps you, فَلَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ. There is ghalib. فَلَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ. There is no one who can overpower you. وَإِن يَخْذُلْكُمْ. Look at the next. وَإِن يَخْذُلْكُمْ. And if he decides to disgrace you. وَإِن يَخْذُلْكُمْ. And if he disgraces you. فَمَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يَنْصُرُكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ. Then who is there who can come to your help after that?